Monica Crowley, former Treasury Department Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs. This is like shooting fish in a barrel, but we got to show Schumer, who, along with his buddies in the Quad and then the other radicals that he now votes with, is saying that the filibuster equals Jim Crow, et cetera. Here's what he said just a few years ago. Listen.
The ideologues in the Senate want to turn what the founding fathers called the cooling saucer of democracy into the rubber stamp of dictatorship. They want to change the rules in midstream, to wash away 200 years of history. They want to make this country into a banana republic. It'll be a doomsday for democracy if we do.
So now he's doing exactly the opposite of what he was counseling back then. I mean, it's not surprising. This is Senator Schumer, after all. But don't those videos eventually catch up with these people?
Well, you would think so, David, but we're the only ones talking about it. You know, the mainstream propaganda press will never hold him accountable or put his words back to him the way we just did. So there really is no accountability. Look, we can argue that this is politics, and of course it is. It is Schumer. So none of this comes as a surprise, but there's no sense of principle here. This is a raw exercise of power, which Schumer and the Democrats do very effectively when they're in control, so nobody should be surprised. What is surprising is that Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema are the only two on the Democratic side who are willing to stand up to this. This isn't just about their voting bill, which, let's face it, if you're opposed to any kind of measures for voter integrity, the only reason you are opposed to it is to create a space for theft and fraud and all kinds of shenanigans. So let's be really honest about what this bill is. But the fact that there are only two Democrat senators willing to stand up to preserve the integrity of the institution, never mind a core part of our Republican government, Republican small r, that is cause for quite concern.
Well, there's also the question about exactly what they want, other than federalizing voter rules that the Constitution says are up to the states. At first, last summer, in the beginning of the summer, they were against voter ID until they saw polls that came out showing 80% of American voters want voter ID. 81% actually support voter ID. Only 18% oppose it. Then, surprise, surprise, at the end of the summer, they were in favor of voter ID, although, albeit, there was still some kind of discussion about what that would mean. So, again, they really don't stand for anything except for the federalization of voter laws, right?
Yes, of course. They want to lock in their power permanently. They've been trying for decades to establish a permanent Democrat voting majority, and they look at this bill as yet another route to lock that in and to achieve that. Look, when they saw these polls, they realized they were on the wrong side of the American people. Upwards of 75 to over 80% of the American people say, hey, requesting a voter ID is just common sense. It preserves the integrity of our elections, and we're for it. By the way, David, that cuts across every demographic group, including African-American voters and Latino voters and female voters, right? So they say that they're for it, but they're really not for it, because anything that interrupts their march to that permanent control is something that they need to discard.
Right. And very quickly, I mean, the fact is that Latino voters now are running away as fast as they can from the Democratic Party. I mean, the polls show clearly that Democrats have lost a tremendous amount of support from a voting group that they usually could depend on to vote Democratic. They're going away from it. I think part of the reason is because they support these Democrat cities like New York and L.A. that are allowing non-citizens to vote. Latinos here in the United States who work so hard to become citizens, they don't want people walking across the border and voting immediately.
That's exactly right. And not just that, David, which is an important point, but Hispanic voters generally tend to be culturally more conservative. They tend to be religious and so on. So they are more aligned in terms of political values as well as religious and cultural values with the Republicans and the conservatives. President Trump actually expanded the base to include a lot more Hispanic voters that came to vote for him, as well as the Republican Party. We continue to build build on that. And you're seeing Hispanics in deep blue cities like New York and Seattle and along the border
big shift.
With Mexico, who are now, they're turning
Huge
to the
shift.
Republican Party in droves.
Monica, great to see you. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Stay